What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Sorry. Okay, let's do this. Okay. Sorry about like the inconsistent upload rate recently. You know, Thanksgiving was coming around the corner, and then that took up my schedule. And then I've been preparing stuff over on the joint channel recently. That took up some more time. And then I've been doing stuff over for the gaming channel, and that took up some time as well. So I'll apologize, saying sorry about that. And just so you know, some updates are probably going to be a little bit shaky until next week, Monday. And no, this isn't because y'all didn't reach 150 on the second channel. Don't worry about that. That's all good. So I am going to apologize for that. But, getting off topic here, let's go shout out the Discord. So, I'm shouting out Shadow Naruto. Hello. Scorch 0. Night Fox 18. Kara. Gonna call it Kara. K-Ray. Kovoid. It's K-O-U, weird V, free sign, upside down Y, L, rabbit emoji. So, let's call him Rabbit. Thank you, Rabbit. Shira Tensei, The Noob, Havoc, Necro Nap Gear, Anto4, and Scart Wolves. Thank you all for joining this video. And now let's jump straight into this what if. Now see, where we last left off last time, Izuku had just woken up after going to the house of fertility. They both had to go ahead and go do some, well, they had to prepare. That's what they had to do. Tonight they were going inside the dungeon. Or not tonight, today. They were going on an expedition. They started off by gearing up everything. Izuku was decided to stay inside the rearguard party even though he was a level 2 adventurer. And people now, unless if they were actual friends with the person with Izuku, called him Deku by his alias, which most people in that area did not know that Deku meant useless. So Deku was kind of a weird alias. And for people who are wondering, yes, I know, like, you know, they're subbed and stuff, but I'm pretty sure the language is not Japanese, so Deku wouldn't really make sense. Especially because there's a whole entire country called Eastern, which, of course, people from Eastern would go ahead and say that Deku means useless. But, yeah. Izuku won't be known as, Deku wouldn't be known as useless. It would just be known as a weird random word that someone is named. That being Izuku, of course. Izuku was put into the rear guard areas. He hadn't really talked with much of the other people inside the Loki familiar other than really just Aiz. Deku didn't realize it, but Aiz took up a lot of his time. He talked with her a lot more than he had talked with anywhere else, which kind of felt somewhat weird to Izuku. So he was thinking that maybe Aiz was, you know, maybe somewhat special to him. He felt like he could connect with Aiz better, or had a greater trust with Aiz. Well, Izuku really didn't know what to say anymore. He was trying to think of reasonings why, but all the reasonings he could think of related more or less back to the same thing. He must feel something different when he was nearby Aiz, something different that he didn't felt with any other girl. Izuku was really wondering what it could be. Then again, he really knew that he had no time to waste by thinking about Aiz. Even though he didn't count his time wasted thinking about Aiz, he still decided that he had more important stuff to do. Izuku laughed because he was thinking about what Bakugo would have stated. He remembered all of his friends for the first time in a long time and shed a few lighter tears. The tears were meant to symbolize he lost. No one really knew why Izuku was crying, but eyes comforted him in almost a second's notice, so most people felt more envious towards Izuku than the actual feeling. Eyes knew that Izuku's past was one of his greatest mysteries and expected that it had something to do with his past. She didn't know what it was, but she thought maybe it might be dungeon related, seeing how they were jumping into the dungeon. Eventually, Aiz and Izuku both stood up. Izuku thanked Aiz for letting him cry for a minute. Aiz said nothing about it, but gave him a thumbs up and a reassurance. She probably expected it to be something worse, so much worse that he couldn't talk with her about. But then Izuku chimed in saying that he would have loved to actually said what his issue was, but now wasn't the time, which I, once again, fully understood. The base issue was that it was Izuku's, well, without lack of a better word, most in-depth fears. So him not talking about it was, on the contrary, very understandable. Eventually, Izuku ended up preparing. He had gotten his equipment from Hephaestus earlier. The new boots he had were pretty cool. Hephaestus had also crafted him a new sword. The sword seemed to have some sort of fire capabilities enchanted on the center. The hilt also seemed like it was made out of a pure flame than anything else. Izuku was actually quite pleased by the sword. He thought it looked pretty cool, even though Izuku had no clue how to use this, and he asked Aiz once they reached the 18th floor, which they should be once they reach in about a day, to help train him on the sword itself, which Aiz very much so, to her happiness, obliged, and decided that she could train Izuku very simply. Izuku eventually started to work his way into the dungeon with the rest of the group. They easily blitzed throughout the first couple of floors, eventually making it to the end of the 17th floor. Much to their surprise, while making it here, they saw Bell and the rest of his party. Bell was with a small girl who seemed to have cat ears, commonly referred to as a clanthrope in this, well, realm. Izuku would have just thought it was a normal girl with a cat quirk back in his world, but he remembered that these two worlds were very, very different. Just from magic alone, Izuku could understood that. Izuku quickly teleported over to Bell using the Deus Ex Machina teleportation incantation spell. That was a lot of words. Surprising everyone, because almost no one knew he had teleportation magic except for Revelia and Aiz, which were the only two that really knew about Izuku's capabilities in the magic frontier. Izuku showed up in front of Bell, much to Bell's surprise, but wasn't really upset about him showing up at all. And eventually, Bell and Izuku, after talking for a bit, entered the fighting room, much to the surprise of everyone else, but everyone knew that Izuku had been able to fight the Goliath priorhand, so fighting the Goliath now shouldn't be much of an issue for him. Bell and Izuku both started to fight the Goliath. Much more of Izuku teleporting around the Goliath and hitting the Goliath's weak points with multiple different types of spells. Izuku's magic category had grown a lot since the last time he had really used it, being able to fire off multiple smaller spells based off of Todoroki's fire and ice, which allowed him a lot of assistance. He also noticed that just because he said the name of a quirk/spell user or character from a TV show doesn't mean that his powers were solely limited to it. Even though Todoroki's ice could only form off the ground, or on a physical substance, Izuku was able to form actual icicles straight in the air, which Izuku found this to be very, well, amazing. He realized that he could probably take his friend's abilities and basically upgrade them to an absurd degree. Izuku didn't even want to think about what he could do with Bakugo's quirk. Then he wondered if he could start fusing together names of certain spells and creating combo quirks. Izuku kind of shrugged. He really didn't want to think about that currently, and decided that he would just continue, well, doing as he was doing now. Seeing how there didn't seem to be really any issue with what he was doing, and seeing how it basically permitted him to do whatever he wants, Izuku decided that it would be the best decision to just do what he was doing. Much to the surprise of everyone other than Aiz and Revelia, seeing Izuku teleport around, firing off multiple spells, and even some people even saw him what appeared to be float in the air for a second, were kind of shocked at what their, well, newest recruit to the Familia could do, and he was only level 2. For some of the more seasoned adventurers, this was like an aspiration to them. They want to inspire to become better than Izuku, but to some of the other adventurers, they really just wanted to keep, well, grinding. Some found this a massive turn-off, while others found this as an amazing aspiration. Some people would always marvel at Izuku's capabilities, while some just claimed that he had pure luck and that was all it was. Bell started to call Izuku a hero, or at least in his eyes, a hero. Seeing how Bell, for being a dunce that he is, can see relationships other people have pretty easily, assumed that Izuku and Aiz were together, mainly from their basic interactions with each other and the obvious show of care that they both had for each other. So Bell thought Izuku was mainly doing this just to protect Aiz, and thought that he was a hero that was always able to protect his girl no matter what. Much to Izuku's non-understanding, because he just chooses to protect everyone, not just his girl, and always have a smile on his face while he did it. Some other people inside the venturing group thought this was slightly sadistic, without a lack of a better term, mainly because he smiled as he smite down the floor 17 boss with one strong punch. They had saw that Izuku had a sword on his waist and a small, weird-shaped object on his other side. No one had really known the item that was called a gun. It was unheard of. Not to mention it was, well, under wraps secret that most people didn't even know existed. Granted, the few people that did were part of the upper echelon of the Loki Familiar, and even the captain doesn't even know what a revolver is, mainly because he wasn't really there during the conversation. Only 3 people in the Loki Familiar knows what a gun is. Well, one in the Hestia Familiar, and that being the goddess herself, and Hephaestus herself were the only people who knew what a gun was. Aiz only knew it because she was with Izuku while he picked up his items, and Izuku had explained to her what a gun was. As they proceeded forward, Izuku remembered that Hephaestus had enchanted his gun with unique properties. His gun could automatically reload with a pouch that was on his side, which was behind him, changing that to behind him. The pouch behind him could automatically allow him to reload whenever he asks for a reload. This allowed him to automatically reload his ammunition, which was a blessing to Izuku. Izuku also had specialized bullets. When he wanted a specialized ammunition, such as a flare ammunition, which was a bullet that, when small amounts of magical energy is applied to it, creates a massive fireball on impact. Or when he wants a shock bullet, which creates shocking damage to opponent on impact. Izuku was still impressed by what the goddess of forging could do, but then he reminded himself. She was a literal goddess of forging. He shouldn't really be impressed by that. Izuku then decided that he should let everyone else really take the reins for the rest of this area, especially after entering the 18th floor. Izuku entered the 18th floor with Bell, and they both started practicing solo. Izuku and Bell were, well, pretty much even when it came to Izuku without using One For All. It almost seemed like Bell could manipulate the luck around him to an excellent degree. Almost like events seemed to happen to help him, no matter what it may be. Izuku found this to be pretty curious, and he didn't understand why that was the case. Meanwhile, while Izuku and Deku were training, Izuku was training without One For All, of course, because he didn't want to easily damage everything else inside the dungeon itself, especially after he tested going 100% on a nearby forest that is now a pond, or to be more accurate, a lake. Yeah. Meanwhile, while them two were training, Aiz was chilling while Leafia walked up to her and asked her the $1 million question that almost everyone coined into as soon as it was asked. Leafia asked Aiz, are you and Izuku dating? Now, Aiz was momentarily confused by this. Dating? She had heard the term such before, this and there, but never really cared interest to it, but wondered, saying, well, dating? No. But do I have feelings for Izuku? Yes. This almost flat out made Leafia drop dead. Hearing that alone almost made her drop dead. This almost made everyone else kinda envy the new boy inside the group. And then, Revelia asked the $10 million question and went, so why aren't you dating Izuku? Aiz then responded stating, well, you see, I'm not dating Izuku currently because, well, I just never asked to date him. Which was really confusing to everyone else. And then Revelio asked, why didn't you ask to date him? And Aiz explained, stating, well, you see, whenever I try to come to the topic of that, my chest feels really unpleasant and not really just to give out the statement that I wanted to give out, so I decide against it. Revelio almost facepalmed, knowing that Aiz was very much so like this, and understanding that this is probably how she responds every time. And then Revelia says, you will go attack monsters 4 times your size without a care in the world. But when it comes to asking a boy out, you literally freeze up. God, you are horrible. This confused Aiz quite heavily. She didn't understand why she was apparently so horrible. She knew that Izuku most likely liked her too, but she figured it was quite common for girls not to be able to express their personal emotions that way. Especially because she figured that most people couldn't really do it. If she was having issues, that means most people were having issues. Eventually, Revelia says, okay, Aiz, if you go ask out Deku, I can almost guarantee he'll probably say yes right on the spot. Meanwhile, while Revelia was trying to psych up Aiz to ask out Deku, on the other side, Izuku was still training with Bell. Izuku always got the better of Bell, especially when he used 1% of One For All. He could easily decimate the young boy. Eventually, Bell decided to ask the $1 million question on Izuku's side and said, are you dating Aiz? And Izuku tried to come up with a quick and easy block by saying, oh, what? No way. which Maybell gave Izuku the look like, "You really think you can fool me?" Which then Izuku sighed and stated, "I like her, but I don't know how to directly ask her out." Well, maybe y'all should ask each other out after the end of this mission. Izuku decided that he figured that that would be a pretty good idea. After the end of the dungeon, and when they both have free time, Izuku can ask Aiz out. Eventually, Izuku and Bell stopped training for the day and went to sleep, and it kind of repeated that process for about a day or two, until they decided to start venturing deeper into the dungeon. The rest of the Loki familiars slowly started to proceed into the lower floors. They ended up proceeding lower and lower until they came across a new floor. They got down to floor 43. And this floor was very cold. They had taken a rest at floor 39, but the deeper they got, the monsters started to get stronger and stronger. So much to where the point Izuku had to actually start using One For All at a higher and higher case level, making Izuku have to use it way stronger. Eventually, Izuku entered the very, very bottom floor. Or not the very bottom floor, but the lowest floor the Loki familiar had entered. Izuku realized that this was a very frigid and cold floor. So Izuku walked over to Revelia and asked, "Is there any sort of spell that could nullify cold over the entire area of the caravan?" Revelia says not that she knows of, and Izuku's like, fuck. Which was very rare for Izuku to cuss, which kind of threw off Revelia slightly, as he then decided to say, "Okay, so, okay, by the power of Endeavor and Todoroki, make a dome that's nice, hot, and smoky. Make it so it covers the entire area for Todoroki. Do as I wish." And an entire dome covered the caravan. Izuku realized that his mana drained not super quickly, but kinda quick. This allowed everyone to stay relatively warm with lower gear. Of course, Izuku had to maintain keeping the dome active for the entire time. They had some extra mana pots, mainly for Revelia and stuff, but they realized that with Izuku constantly pioneering their capabilities to go deeper into dungeon using this new spell he concocted, they realized that maybe giving him some of the stuff would be quite useful towards them too. Eventually, they were able to progress 5 new floors, much without Izuku fighting and with everyone else fighting. Eventually, more and more, fires started to erupt. This fire erupted at random points, so much so that they had lost 2 entire wagons to it, much to Izuku's dismay. So Captain Finn decided to pull everyone back and get them to a safer location. He had decided that rather than losing 3 wagons and Izuku being out of mana and them all dying, he decided that it would probably be smarter just to get out of there now, and with Izuku's magic. So eventually, they led everyone up. Izuku eventually almost passed out when they got out of the final area, mainly because of the intense amount of magic he had used. Drinking a couple pots to restabilize himself, he looked over to where a recent fire hole had been made and saw that it seemed to drop a couple floors. He didn't know the exact number, but Izuku figured with his basic ability, he should be able to jump down all the floors without any issue. Izuku decided to hop down the floors when everyone's looking around. He was very, very, very confused by this and really didn't know, Captain Finn was very, very confused. Mainly because Izuku had just jumped down like 5 floors without informing anyone. This, of course, was quite an adept issue. Eventually, Izuku then ended up hopping down to about 5 floors, which confused everyone, and everyone thought that Izuku was a dead man. Other than Aiz had seen Izuku's complete capabilities and saw that it had way surpassed hers, and if she were even to attempt to fight against Izuku, she would probably die. Seeing how she knew this, she knew Izuku was probably just gonna fight some things and teleport back up. She remembered that he had set a very specific thing on her. And Izuku said that whenever he needed to teleport back up, he would be able to do so via of her, which Aiz felt pretty proud of, not gonna lie. So eventually, she decided to continue walking onwards, which confused everyone else a lot. Eventually, she explained that Izuku won't die. He's good. Which some people were kind of upset, Mainly because when, I said this means that it should work just fine. Izuku shouldn't have any problems. Which really upsetted most of them. Surprise, surprise. Eventually, Izuku ended up falling down. He saw his opponent that he was going to strike down. The opponent, very simply, was a monster. Nothing more, but it seemed to be a big giant black dragon. Izuku then remembered that this dragon was probably the dragon that had caused Aiz very much so pain. He reminded himself how much Aiz had talked about the dragon that had caused her a lot of pain in her life. He then decided that it was time to, take out the dragon. Izuku went to go attack the dragon. Izuku jumped left, using about 15% of One For All, which would equivalent to about around his 50% in his regular form before coming here. It would equal about 50%. But now he can full counting at 15 and just equal 15% in his new form, which was pretty impressive. Izuku then quickly jumped around the dragon, dealing multiple blows to his sides and his head. He then fired a fireball at every other time he got a chance. He shocked the dragon in the back of the neck, causing the dragon to quickly swivel around and smack Izuku with his tail, smacking Izuku into the wall. Izuku activated 50% of One For All, the highest amount he could control without injuring his body, and bounced off the wall. The entire wall behind him shattered into small, tiny little rock projectiles as he flew towards the dragon at insane speeds. The dragon quickly turned its head and tried to block Izuku, but Izuku had punched it in its face. Dragon got sending into the other wall, causing the wall to shatter on its pure impact by the force of its body. The dragon looked towards Izuku and snorted out fire before breathing giant flames out of its mouth. Izuku quickly dodged the flames and jumped left. The dragon, seeing this, whipped its tail around, about to hit Izuku before Izuku quickly flipped over the tail and grabbed the tail and chucked the dragon downwards. The dragon got pissed at Izuku at this point and eventually turned around and tried to swallow Izuku whole with its gaping jaw. Izuku barely was able to push open the thing, as he slowly had to use 56% of his power to start pushing it open. Izuku's arms slowly started to fracture as a cause of this, but Izuku was very used to feeling pain at this point, so the pure aspect of him getting injured wasn't much to his dismay. Izuku eventually pushed the dragon off of him and attacked him once more. This time using 75%, he punched the dragon, and on the impact, he used 100%, shattering his fist as the dragon goes flying back into the wall. Izuku sees the power core and teleports over to the dragon, and then he punches the power core once again with his fist at 100% and destroys the power core. The dragon pops as Izuku falls to his knee. He looks around and he sees that the dungeon was pretty banged up. And Izuku remembered something. When the dungeon gets banged up, it summons in its dungeon guardian, which Izuku knew that he had to go before the dungeon guardian got summoned. Sadly, before Izuku could move, he felt a strong attack hit him in his side, sending him flying into a wall. He looked to see a weird skeletal creature and remembered that it looked exactly like the dungeon guardian was described. It was a skeletal creature for a head, and its body was about the size of a T-Rex. It had a long tail with two long protruding arms with sharp, bony claws protruding out of them. Its feet had claws coming out that looked as sharp as knives. It opened its gaping jaw to reveal rows of serrated teeth looking towards Izuku, with a purple ghost-like tongue as well. Izuku looked into the eyes of the beast. Izuku was pretty injured at this point. He had suffered quite a couple blows from the dragon, but not to mention that, but now he also got surprise attacked by the dungeon guardian, causing him to be quite injured. Izuku looked towards the dungeon guardian, as the dungeon guardian looks towards Izuku and roars. That's where we're going to leave it off, guys. If you liked it, hit the like button, and if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button. And until next time, goodbye.